Hi, I'm Ria. Welcome to It's the Audacity for Me, a personal development podcast that's a little different than most. This show is for anyone who's tired of the hustle mentality, but also recognizes that not everything is love and light. I'm here to help guide you to a more sustainable life that's in tune with nature, but also to help you see the light already inside of you. I can't wait to see you in this week's episode. Let's go. Hello, and welcome back to It's the Audacity for Me. For anyone new, welcome. Thank you all so much for listening. I've been working on a ton of different stuff lately and really focusing on the podcast and other content that I've been creating. I recently started posting some of my TikTok content over on YouTube Shorts, just as another way to share the podcast to fresh eyes and share some other content too. Even though it's been a learning curve, I've really been enjoying the process. And over the past few months, I've really been learning a lot and really pushing myself to try new things. Because I'm really trying to focus on creating content specifically for the podcast, I've been looking for new ways to share. And in addition to YouTube Shorts, I've also been working with Pinterest on Pinterest, trying to create some content over there. So if you are on either of those platforms, if you're interested in following my journey with those platforms, please feel free to follow along. Also, over on Patreon next week, we have a fun bonus episode for spooky season. I am really excited about this one just because I love Halloween, and this is a great opportunity to dive into some really random spooky topics I've always been interested in. So if you want to hear more about paranormal, different dimensions, liminal spaces, and other Twilight Zone-y topics, make sure you're tuned in for next week's episode over on Patreon. The link for the Patreon and all of my other links can be found in the show notes for today's episode. Now on to today's topic, outsourcing your power. What does that even mean? Well, outsourcing is when an individual or a company decide to delegate tasks to a third party. There was a show several years ago, I think it was on NBC, called Outsourced, and I would love to hear if I am not the only one that remembers this. So if you remember that show, please let me know. But did you know work isn't the only place that things can be outsourced? Sometimes outsourcing is a great thing. Other times it's not so good. When you've got too much on your plate and you outsource some of those tasks, that can feel amazing, and it can do wonders for your overall wellness. But when you're outsourcing things like your personal power, that's where it can get kind of tricky. In today's episode, we'll talk more about what your personal power is, how to protect your power and energy from others, and ways you can harness your personal power rather than outsourcing it. Let's go. So, what even is your personal power? Well, your personal power is something that you have the moment you're born. And it's really something that you develop throughout your life. It's something that everyone has, but often people aren't taught how to really harness it. Your personal power is something like your confidence or your trust in yourself. It's the most authentic version of you, confident in all of their choices, prepared for life, trusting that even if something goes wrong, you'll be okay and you'll be safe. We can all trust in ourselves and draw on our personal power to get us through situations, to build our resilience, and ultimately to build lives that we love. But maybe you're on your healing journey or you're in a place where you feel like your personal power is lacking. Well, this episode's for you. Your beliefs might differ from mine, and that's okay. But personally, I believe that everyone has God inside of them, not necessarily in the Christian God sense, but more in a universal consciousness that connects all of us that is just completely divine. The best way I can describe my belief is like water. Our bodies are made of it, our earth is made of it. It's both inside of us and outside of us, around us externally. It completely encompasses us in everything that we do and brings us life. It completely connects us. That's how I see the light inside of everyone. You are an individual soul, a unique expression of the universe in human form. And that, my friends, is your personal power. When you build up things like your self-esteem, your confidence, and your authenticity, you're working to build up your own personal power. Some things break down your personal power, like lacking boundaries and not recognizing or processing emotions. Other things can build up your personal power, like living in your most authentic expression of yourself, taking care of yourself first, and taking time to journal or process your emotions in another healthy way. One of the biggest ways that people lose their personal power is by outsourcing it. And most people don't even realize they're doing it. So, what does outsourcing your power even mean? And what does it look like in action? Outsourcing your power in action looks like maybe calling every friend for advice. Now, touching base with your friends is always a great thing when those friends are people who feed your soul. But constantly calling to go over the details of daily interactions or constant venting, well, that just isn't helpful, and it really isn't fair to your friends either. First, it can be super selfish if you aren't also creating that space for your friends, but you could be putting a heavy weight on your friends' shoulders that they might not be qualified to carry. Relationships should be reciprocal, and sometimes it's better to seek professional help rather than putting all the emotional work and responsibility onto your friend. Outsourcing your personal power might also look like not wanting to make decisions for yourself. When you're constantly reaching out to others to help you make decisions, whether that's calling a friend, searching online, or scouring social media, you're taking away that decision-making power from yourself. This fills your head with everyone else's expectations and just their worldview without any context for how they arrived at those expectations to begin with. For all you know, someone's advice or opinion could stem from a traumatic place that ultimately is them projecting a trauma cycle onto your situation, and that person is probably unaware of it. There's a common phrase, don't take advice from people you wouldn't trade places with, and I think it's pretty applicable here. Your personal power is like a muscle. The more you use it, the more it builds, and the less you use it, the weaker it becomes. This is the exact same thing. The more you rely on other people to make your own decisions, the less you trust in your own inner guidance system, your inner GPS, if you will. Relying on others' opinions of you for your self-worth can go both ways, and each side of the coin can get really tricky. This goes in with leaning on other people to make decisions for you or not being able to trust yourself and yourself alone to make decisions. Relying on other people's opinions of you can really, really impact your self-worth. Now, in general, relying on people's opinions of you, either good or bad, is a habit that will completely destroy your happiness. Even when they're good things, even if people are complimenting you or praising you, you'll be constantly analyzing their words. And of course, when people are hateful, you'll internalize that too as a flaw within yourself rather than seeing it for what it is, a projection of that person's inner world. So never rely on anyone for your self-worth. Know that you are worthy of taking up space on this planet just like everyone else. And when you recognize your self-worth, that's how you keep from outsourcing your power. So if you're outsourcing your power, how would you know? How do you know? Well, the first sign or symptom would be not spending time or energy on self-care practices because your energy is being used up focusing on others, and others are draining your energy without any sort of like barrier. Or if I'm picturing a pasta strainer, a colander. So whenever you put the pasta in, it drains the water out, right, and keeps the pasta in. And that's kind of what our souls are experiencing in a way. It's like this colander of just people siphoning energy out. Probably the pasta colander was not the best example there, but I'm just imagining like these holes where your energy is escaping. So whenever that's happening, you're going to have those symptoms of like relying on others for decision making and not being able to just kind of stand on your own 2 feet and really understand and feel your self-worth and feel that personal power. So if your energy is being used up on someone else's viewpoints and their judgments, someone who is struggling with their personal power is likely in a place of confusion because when you rely on other people's opinions, they often conflict. Who do you know who to listen to and where do you go with that information? And you have no inner knowing to draw on or to stand on or even differentiate who you want to listen to because you haven't really honed in your personal power and really defined your beliefs and your boundaries. That's another thing. Someone who is struggling with personal power might also have difficulty navigating the day-to-day because of codependency. The codependency of outsourcing your power creates situations in which you feel as though you need another person to get you through. And that just isn't healthy. It also continues the cycle and it reinforces the lack of confidence in your authentic self. Now, if you're hearing this and you're thinking, okay, I feel like maybe there's some areas I need to regain my power. Maybe there's some holes where some personal power is escaping. Well, let's talk about it. Let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll talk more about how to regain and maintain your personal power reserves. Taking back your power means acknowledging that you're worthy of having it in the first place. Recognizing that you are powerful can be transformational in and of itself, but it's not a one and done situation. It requires daily habits and accountability to yourself. It requires taking care of yourself and prioritizing self-care over pretty much everything else. It's like they say on airplanes, put your mask on before helping someone else. Now, I understand that there are external issues and systemic problems that really hinder people from taking proper care of themselves. But truly and honestly, you have to feel safe and have your needs met in order to meet someone else's. Without anything in your reserve, you can't pull from that to help someone else. And if you are a parent, this episode is especially helpful, or at least when I went through this process for myself, it was really helpful for me because it was very easy for me to outsource parenting decisions because I didn't know what I was doing. No one does when they have their first kid. No one gives you, well, actually, I take that back because when I have my second child, they did actually give me a handbook on how to take care of this child. Now, with my first, they didn't, but the phrase always goes, you don't get a handbook when you have a kid, but they kind of did that. So to be fair, give credit where credit is due. I did actually receive a handbook, but no one knows what they're doing when they're a first-time parent. And so you so easily neglect everything that you have in you and all the needs that you have to take care of this other human. And that's necessary, right? We have these little people to take care of, but understand that there's two opposite ends. Don't go to the extreme and lock yourself, in a spa for a week and don't take care of your kids. But make sure that you're not hungry and you're not thirsty and you're not tired. Of course, there's seasons of life. They ebb and they flow. There's busier seasons, there's slower seasons. But just really try and take care of yourself. And although it may seem counterintuitive, you really need to slow down to speed up sometimes. You need time to take care of yourself if you want to be there for your kids. And also, I want to add, when people talk about self-care, I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is a bubble bath. And truly and honestly, I'm not saying take a bubble bath and everything will be fine. I'm talking about really, truly taking care of yourself, flossing your teeth, doing the internal work, going to therapy, making those doctor's appointments you've been putting off, taking medicine like you should, moving your body in a healthy way, eating in a way that's good for your body. It's really not the sexy stuff that counts. It's building up your understanding that you have power. It's building up trust in yourself and building up the understanding and knowing that you're worthy of having power. Ultimately, you're building the relationship you have with yourself. So now that you've built up this power and this relationship with yourself, how are you going to maintain it? Well, last week on Patreon, I talked more about the 12 laws of the universe, and one of the trickier laws to understand, the law of the perpetual transmutation of energy, can help you better understand how to maintain your power. Now, all of the universal laws are really helpful with this, so if this is something you want to learn more about, that would be a great episode to check out over on the Patreon, and I'll make sure I include the link to that episode specifically in the show notes so you can check it out. But after you've really built your boundaries and established the understanding that you are powerful, you want to keep that feeling alive. All boundaries need maintenance. And sometimes we really don't realize that we need to maintain our boundaries. But we do. We want to review them every so often and intentionally, consciously. Everything that you put intent behind, you can direct, right? If you're just kind of going through life wishy-washy, not really putting intent behind anything with no real intention, it's hard to create a life that you love because you're kind of wandering aimlessly. So wherever you put your energy and your intention, that's what's going to expand. So With our boundaries, sometimes we just need to dedicate a little attention there, right? And then when we do that, we might realize that our boundaries are a little stricter than we need them to be, or sometimes they're a little too loose and we need to maybe tighten up in some areas. And those could be boundaries that you have with yourself or boundaries with others. Sometimes we realize we're giving away more power than we meant to, or sometimes we realize that maybe we want to put a little more power behind certain goals or aspirations. Sometimes the fence needs a little painting. Maybe you just need to revisit some of your boundaries to assess how they're working for you. Just because a relationship, and I mean this generally, friendship, coworker situation, any relationship, just because it was working 6 months ago doesn't mean it has to work today. And if you are constantly growing and you're working on yourself and you're moving forward, your life should look different years down the road. It shouldn't look the same because you're growing. And when you know better, you do better, as Maya Angelou said. The idea of permanence is really something that wreaks havoc on our lives. And it's something I'll be talking about more in a future episode. But so often we fall into these traps of one size. Meaning, once I do X, Y, and Z, I'll be happy. Once I lose weight, I'll be happier. Once I learn everything there is to know, I'll start that business. Once I graduate college, I'll have money. These are really all just fallacies. You can think about it like a scientific experiment. There's way too many variables. Thinking of boundaries and your personal power as a set it and forget it situation, it is going to set something. It's going to set you up for failure. And also realize that just like seasons in nature, we go through seasons in our own lives too. Allow yourself in your life to have space to ebb and flow with the seasons, and accept that some seasons will be busier than others, and learn to enjoy each season for what it is, rather than just trying to get through it and pushing ahead, or just being focused on what's to come or dwelling on what could have been. Allow yourself to really enjoy the season that you're in. I hope today's episode helped you to get clear on your personal power and maybe some areas where you could harness it a little more. Remember, you have the power within you to create a life you absolutely love, one that you couldn't even imagine in your wildest dreams. My sincerest hope and wish for everyone listening is to one day look back and say, I can't believe I made it here, or something like that. I hope you look back a year from now or 5 years from now, whenever, wherever, and see how the universe has always been working in your favor. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have the most beautiful of day friends. Bye. If you enjoyed today's episode, let's connect. You can find me on all the socials, but primarily check me out over on TikTok. You can also look at the show notes for links from today's episodes to connect further and to support and unlock bonus content over on Patreon. I can't wait to connect with you soon. Bye.